first question we look at is, what was the most significant trend in the evolution of modern man, that is Homo sapiens, from his ancestors? When you look at the chapter, if we do a quick revision of the chapter, at the first we begin with the origin of the universe. How did evolution of Earth, evolution of the universe, how did it originate? We look at that. So we had a few theories come, right? So origin of life, there were 4 theories that were primary. The first one was panspermia, which was by Greek thinkers. The second one we saw was the theory of spontaneous generation, which was then disproved by Louis Pasteur. The third one we saw was the theory of by Oparin and Haldane, the theory of chemical evolution. The second, so that's into 2 parts. The first is chemical evolution. The second is biogenesis. And then we came to the fourth theory, which talked about the theory of special creation. It was more of a religious literature-based theory. Then we saw the evolution of life. Evolution of life, we spoke more about Darwin's theory of evolution, which talks about 2 main things, branching descent and natural selection. Then we looked at the evidences for evolution. So how did we come to this conclusion that evolution happens, or how it happens? So we had multiple evidences for it, right? First one was paleontological, wherein we looked at fossils and sedimentary layers of rock. The second you looked at was embryological. Now this theory was put forth, wherein they said that an embryo goes through or looks like the adults of all the other animals before it comes to looking like the adult of its own. That was embryological evidence, but that was then disproved. Now these names are confusing, so do try and remember them carefully. It was proposed by Ernst Haeckel, but it was disproved by Carl Ernst. Then we had the 2 concepts of divergent and convergent evolution. We'll look at that in detail. We have MCQs. Those are 2 important topics. And finally, we came to biochemical similarity. So when there is, when you talk about protein, DNA, you look at all the other animals and mammals, see that there is a certain similarity, the nucleotide sequence. That those similarities also talk about evolution. All evolved into different species that we are today, but we came from a common place. Right? So that is done. Then we had the evidence of the theory of natural selection, wherein we look at the example of industrial melanism. Look at the industrial revolution, this was taken in England and case study. We'll go through that also when the MCQ comes. Then we had adaptive radiation, important concept. This was mainly observed by Darwin again. Then we see a very good example of Australia, because Australia is a continent and it's got a lot of endemic species. So that is a good example. Those are important names. Then we saw biological evolution, and in which we also see the name of Thomas Malthus, say that he may have influenced how Darwin came about to think of natural selection and how it happened. Then we had the mechanism of evolution. Now, mechanism of evolution, there was another scientist, Hugo de Vries, who we study a lot in genetics. He said he disagreed with Darwin. He said that this is not inheritable or an adaptation, but it's actually a genetic basis to evolution called mutation, saltation. Saltation is when there is a large step single mutation in the genetic makeup. That is, those mutations is what caused the changes to happen, and then evolution gradually happened. He thought the cause of evolution was mutation. But simultaneously, Darwin thought that the cause of mutation was inheritable characters by natural selection. Then we saw the Hardy-Weinberg principle, very important because we see a lot of MCQs based on it, a lot of numerical. Then the brief account of evolution where we see mammals, and finally we come to origin and evolution of man. I gave you a brief introduction to come to this question, which talks about the origin and evolution of man. When we look at the origin and evolution, we see it right from the start. Then we see that we saw Ramapithecus and Dryopithecus. Ramapithecus was man-like, Dryopithecus was more ape-like. Then you had the Australopithecines, which came up in East Africa. Then simultaneously you saw the first human being like Homo erectus, brain capacity of about 650 to 800 cc. Then you saw the main characteristic that we see here is the increasing brain capacity. The answer is increasing cranial capacity, because when we look at this, see that different Homo habilis had 650 to 800. Then we had Homo erectus, who had 900 cc brain capacity. Then Homo neanderthalensis, or Neanderthal man, they had a brain capacity of 1400 cc. And the modern Homo sapiens, or what we are, is 1450. So the most significant trend in the evolution of modern man, which is Homo sapiens, modern Homo, would be increasing cranial capacity. So we got all of them correct. Now let's quickly, मैंने जो explanation दिया है आपको सिर्फ जाके इधर पढ़ना है, देखना है कि if it makes sense. What was the most significant trend in the evolution of modern man? Modern man का हमने देखा सबसे ये origin and evolution of man में main difference वालों ने वही बताया कि cranial capacity आपकी बढ़ती जा रही है. So binocular vision, smaller jaw and upright posture are the main adaptations that led to evolution of man from its ancestors. है ये तो. Like I said, evolution में बहुत आंसर सारे आंसर correct हो सकते हैं. इसमें भी सारे हैं. These are things that did change. आपका जॉ का छोटा हुआ, गोरिल्लाज आर वेरी बिग जॉज, आपके जॉ छोटे हैं, बाइनोकुलर विजन है, आपका फार विजन बेटर है. These things did happen. बट द मोस्ट कॉमन और द मोस्ट मेन थिंग, सबसे लाइक मोस्ट सिग्निफिकेंट ट्रेंड, इसीलिए इधर का सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट लाइन मैंने अंडरलाइन किया कि मोस्ट सिग्निफिकेंट ट्रेंड आपका क्या है, दैट इज